My parents sold my inheritance to fund my brother's business after I paid their debts for years, so I took legal action and watched their favoritism collapse, a 32-year-old guy. And for most of my life, I believed family came before everything. That belief was like a compass guiding every decision I ever made, even when it led me straight into heartbreak. I grew up in a modest, middle-class home, the kind where bills were paid late and family dinners were a mix of laughter and tension. My parents weren't bad people, but they had their favorites, or rather, their favorite, my older brother Ryan. To them, Ryan was a brilliant entrepreneur with limitless potential. He could crash a car, and somehow they'd call it an experience. Meanwhile, I was the steady one, the helper, the fixer, the invisible glue holding things together. When our father lost his job, the weight of responsibility quietly shifted onto my shoulders. I picked up extra shifts at the repair shop and slipped cash into Mom's purse when the fridge was empty. Ryan would talk big about hustling and networking, but he never showed up when it mattered. I convinced myself it was fine, that being the dependable son meant something, that one day they'd see I was the one holding the family afloat. I remember coming home from work one night, grease still on my hands, to find Ryan laughing with my parents over takeout. My mom said proudly, "Your brother's starting his own company. He's going to make us all proud." I smiled, but inside something cracked. I wanted to tell them I'd just paid another month's mortgage, but I didn't. I told myself it didn't matter who got the credit. Family was about sacrifice, and I held on to that belief like it was sacred, never realizing it would be the very thing they'd use against me later. I never realized how easy it was to become someone's safety net until I became one for my entire family. After Dad's job loss, the calls for help became routine. "Just until next month," Mom would say, or "Ryan's in a tight spot. Can you lend him a little?" It was never really a little. But I kept saying yes, because that's what good sons do, right? I worked 12-hour days fixing air conditioners in scorching heat, and spent my evenings calculating how to stretch my paycheck far enough to cover everyone else's mistakes. Ryan, meanwhile, was posting pictures of cocktails and beach sunsets, talking about business meetings that looked a lot like vacations. Still, every time I questioned it, Mom would jump to his defense. "He's networking." "You wouldn't understand, honey." One night, after sending them money again, I opened my own fridge and found nothing but mustard and an expired carton of milk. That's when the bitterness started creeping in. I was living like a ghost in my own life, tired, broke, somehow still the family's ATM. Then came the moment that burned itself into my memory. I got a call from our family accountant, who casually mentioned that Mom and Dad had dipped into my savings account to pay off Ryan's credit card debt. My stomach dropped. I confronted Mom, voice trembling. "Why didn't you ask me?" She sighed, sounding more annoyed than guilty. "You'd have said yes anyway. We just saved time." That sentence, "we just saved time," echoed in my head for days. I realized they didn't see my help as generosity anymore. It was entitlement. Still, I stayed quiet. I told myself it wasn't worth breaking the family apart over money. But deep down, something inside me began to shift. A quiet anger that was only waiting to be awakened. After that fight, things went cold for a while. I stopped visiting as often, but Mom eventually called, her voice soft and guilt-laced. "You know, we appreciate everything you do," she said. "And don't worry, when we're gone, the house and the land will be yours. That's our promise." Those words settled the storm in me, at least for a while. I clung to them like a bandage on an open wound. I told myself all the sacrifices, the extra shifts, the sleepless nights, the loans I'd taken to cover their bills would someday mean something. Maybe I wasn't the favorite son, but I was the loyal one, the responsible one, the one who'd be remembered kindly when everything else faded. Life fell into a pattern again. Work, send money, repeat. Some nights I'd stare at the family house from my car warm lights glowing through the windows, laughter spilling out, and feel both proud and hollow. I was keeping them afloat, yet somehow, I always felt like an outsider looking in. Then Ryan started dropping hints about a big business opportunity. He talked about investors, branding, and expanding the family legacy. He had that smug confidence that made everyone believe him. Dad nodded along at every word. Mom beamed like she was watching a prophecy unfold. I tried to stay supportive, but when Ryan said, "You'll finally be proud of me, bro," something in his tone told me this was going to cost me more than money. A week later, Mom asked me to help repaint the kitchen for resale value. I laughed, thinking she meant future resale. But as I watched her measure new countertops and whisper about upgrading the property, strange unease crept into my chest. I didn't know it then, but those promises of inheritance, the ones that once kept me loyal, were about to be the cruelest lie they'd ever told. It started over dinner one Sunday. Ryan arrived in his usual grand entrance designer jacket, new watch, that fake humility he wore like cologne. Mom cooked his favorite meal, of course. Between bites of roast, he cleared his throat and said, "I've got something big in the works. A family business." Dad's eyes lit up instantly. "Finally, something we can all be proud of." Ryan smirked, leaning back. "I just need some starting capital. Nothing crazy. I was thinking we could pull some equity from the house. It's a solid investment win-win for everyone." I nearly choked. "You want to mortgage the house? The same house you promised would stay in the family?" Mom waved her hand like I was being dramatic. "Don't start, sweetheart. This could change our lives." "Your brother has vision?" "Vision?" I said quietly. "He's failed every job he's touched." Ryan laughed. "Jealousy doesn't suit you, man. Not everyone wants to spend their life fixing air conditioners." The words hit like a slap. Dad stayed silent, which somehow hurt more than anything Ryan said. I looked around the table, the same walls I'd painted, the same light fixtures I'd repair, and realized I didn't belong there anymore. A week later, our family accountant stopped by to review the loan papers. I wasn't supposed to be there, but I came to drop off a spare key. That's when I overheard it my name wasn't on the property title anymore. Mom had removed it years ago for tax reasons. My chest went numb. When I confronted her, she wouldn't meet my eyes. It was just easier this way. "You'll still get your share when the time comes." But something in her tone told me the truth. This wasn't about family anymore. It was about control, and for the first time in my life, I felt like a stranger in my own home. A few weeks later, I came home to find the house quieter than usual. The kitchen smelled faintly of lemon cleaner, and boxes were stacked by the door. For a second, I thought my parents were finally decluttering, until I saw the realtor's folder on the counter. My hands went cold. I called out, "Mom? What's going on?" She came out of the hallway, avoiding my eyes. "Oh, you're early? What's this?" I asked, holding up the folder. "It's nothing you need to worry about," she said softly. Ryan's voice cut in from the living room. "We sold the house. The deal's done." I froze. "You what?" Mom started crying, saying it's for Ryan's business. He needs the capital. Once it takes off, he'll buy us a new one. I couldn't even process the words. "You sold our home, the one you promised was my inheritance?" Dad stood behind them, silent and guilty. Ryan smirked like he'd already won. "Relax, man. It's not like you were ever going to use it. You're too scared to take risks." I felt something inside me break. The walls that once held family dinners, laughter, and late-night conversations suddenly felt foreign. My chest tightened as I walked room to room, realizing this place my childhood. My sacrifices was being erased for a gamble I didn't believe in. When I demanded to know how they could do it without my consent, Mom snapped, "It was our house, not yours. You're being selfish." That word selfish code in my head like a curse. After everything I'd given, I was the selfish one. Asterisk, I left without another word, the sound of Ryan's voice chasing me down the driveway. "Don't be dramatic," he called. "This is for the family." But as I looked back at the only home I'd ever known, I realized something awful. This family was no longer mine. For months, I went silent. I moved into a small apartment across town and buried myself in work. I told myself I didn't care that the house, the promises, the betrayal, none of it mattered anymore. But deep down, the loss ate away at me. Every corner of my new place felt temporary, hollow. I had built my parents' stability, and they sold it like it was nothing. Then, one night, I got a text from Dad. Ryan's in trouble. Can you come by? I almost ignored it, but something, maybe guilt, maybe habit, made me go. When I walked into their new rented townhouse, the mood was grim. Mom sat on the couch, crying silently. Ryan paced back and forth, phone glued to his ear. The business that had guaranteed success was collapsing. Investors were pulling out. The money from the house sale was gone. Ryan hung up and slammed his phone on the table. They're pulling the plug. Those idiots don't see the vision. I stared at him. What vision? You blew through hundreds of thousands on cars and parties. You didn't even build a product. Don't start your holier-than-thou crap, he snapped. You wouldn't understand business. Mom grabbed my hand, desperate. Please, can you help? Ryan took some loans under your father's name. We could lose everything. The words knocked the air out of me. He what? Dad wouldn't look at me. His voice was a whisper. I didn't even know until the letters came. For a long moment, I said nothing. The room felt smaller, the air heavy with shame and denial. Every instinct told me to walk away. But when I saw Mom trembling, I caved. I paid off one of the debts just enough to stop them from losing the house they'd already replaced me with. Driving home that night, I told myself it was the last time. But a voice inside whispered the truth. I didn't want to hear they'd call again. After that night, started falling apart in slow motion. My savings were gone, my sleep was wrecked, and every time my phone buzzed, my stomach twisted, half expecting another desperate plea from home. I began to resent the sound of their names. Still, guilt clung to me like a stain I couldn't wash off. I'd come home from 14-hour shifts, collapse on the couch, and just stare at the ceiling. I used to dream about building something for myself, a small business. Maybe even my own workshop, but now I couldn't even remember the last time I did something for me. My entire life had been spent fixing problems other people created. Then came the breaking point. I got a call from Ryan, his voice casual, almost smug. Hey man, I heard you helped with the loan. Appreciate it. I'll pay you back when things turn around. Turn around? I snapped. Ryan, you committed fraud. You used Dad's name without permission? He chuckled. You're too dramatic. It's just business. Something in me shattered. You ruined everything. You took their trust, their house, and you're still the martyr, huh? He interrupted. You love pretending to be the victim. Maybe you like it. The call ended with me slamming my phone against the table so hard it cracked. I sat there, shaking, feeling the years of exhaustion and humiliation crashing down all at once. That's when I realized this wasn't just about money or family. It was about worth. I deleted their contact numbers that night. Every photo, every text. My apartment was silent, except for the hum of the fridge, and for the first time. I let myself cry not out of sadness, but release. A week later, a letter arrived in my mailbox. The sender's name froze me in place. My late uncle's lawyer. Inside was something that would change everything. The letter was from my uncle's estate, attorney, a man I hadn't heard from since the funeral years ago. Inside was a notarized document and a short note. You should be aware of this. Your parents never told you? My hands trembled as I unfolded the paper. It was a copy of the original inheritance agreement, one that clearly listed me as a partial heir to my grandfather's property, the same house my parents had sold. For a moment, I couldn't breathe. The words blurred together, but the meaning was clear. They had sold something that wasn't entirely theirs to sell. I sat there in stunned silence, my mind spinning through every sacrifice, every lie, every moment I'd been told to trust the family. I called my uncle's lawyer immediately. He confirmed what I feared. Legally, you were entitled to a percentage of that property. They couldn't have transferred full ownership without your consent. If you have documentation of financial contributions or records of maintenance, that strengthens your claim. The world around me felt like it tilted. My parents hadn't just betrayed me emotionally, they'd broken the law to erase me from the picture that night. I gathered every old record I could find, bank transfers, repair receipts, proof of mortgage payments. I stared at the stack, remembering every late night I'd worked to keep that roof standing. All for them. When I called my parents, Mom's voice shook. "Please don't do this, honey. We're family. You'll destroy us." "You already did that," I said quietly. "I just didn't see it until now." She sobbed, begging, but I hung up. My hands were shaking, but for the first time in years. Not from fear, from resolve. I wasn't going to be their safety net anymore. I was going to be the consequence. The next morning, I walked into a law office and placed the documents on the desk. "I want to take legal action," I said, and for the first time, I meant every word. Filing the lawsuit was supposed to bring relief. Justice, maybe. But instead it brought chaos. Within days, word spread through the family grapevine. Suddenly, I was the villain, the ungrateful son who dared to drag his parents into court. Aunts stopped answering my calls. My cousin texted me, "You're tearing the family apart, man. Let it go." Mom called in tears almost every night, saying things like, "You'll regret this, and we did it all for your brother's future." Ryan, of course, weaponized the whole thing online. He posted vague quotes about betrayal and greedy relatives, painting himself as the misunderstood genius. Friends from my hometown messaged me, confused. "What's going on with your brother? Why are your parents saying you're suing them?" Every accusation chipped away at me. I'd come home from work and just sit in the dark, surrounded by stacks of legal documents. The silence was deafening. I wasn't sleeping. I wasn't eating. I kept replaying every moment I'd chosen loyalty over self-respect and how they'd turned that loyalty into leverage. One night, I finally broke. I sat on the floor with the lawsuit papers scattered around me, my chest tight, breath shallow. I whispered to myself, what if they're right? What if I'm the problem? But then, my phone buzzed. It was an anonymous email, asked for leaked financial documents from Ryan's company. I opened them, heart pounding. They showed massive withdrawals, fake invoices, even payments to himself disguised as business expenses. I stared at the screen, my despair slowly turning into something colder focus. Ryan hadn't just ruined the family financially. He'd built the entire empire on lies, and now I had proof. For the first time in months, I felt my heart beat steady. I wasn't crazy. I wasn't the villain. The truth was finally on my side. The court date came faster than I expected. I remember standing outside the courthouse, suit pressed, hands shaking. It wasn't fear, it was the weight of everything that had led here. The years of silence, of being told to understand, of watching them choose Ryan over me again and again. This was the moment it all broke. Inside, my parents sat beside Ryan. Mom's eyes were red. Dad stared at the floor. Ryan smirked like this was all beneath him. "You really want to do this, man?" he whispered as I walked past. "Over some old house?" I didn't answer. My lawyer laid out everything, the inheritance documents, forged transfers, the financial records from Ryan's company. Piece by piece, the story unfolded like a slow-motion car crash. When the investigator took the stand, the room went silent. He revealed that Ryan had funneled the remaining sale money into offshore accounts under fake business names. Even the judge frowned. My parents looked stunned, like the world had tilted beneath them. Mom tried to defend him through tears. He didn't mean to, he was under pressure. But Ryan didn't help himself. He snapped, "Don't baby me, Mom. I did what I had to do, because no one else in this family ever believed in me." That outburst sealed it. The courtroom felt frozen in disbelief. Dad's face turned pale as the judge ordered a full audit and froze Ryan's assets. The verdict was clear: fraud, illegal transfer of property, and restitution. I didn't cheer. I didn't smile. I just watched as Ryan was led away, shouting excuses no one believed anymore. My parents couldn't even look at me. The favoritism that had defined our family for decades had finally crumbled in public. Under oath, as I walked out of the courthouse, sunlight hit my face, and for the first time in years, I didn't feel small. I felt free. Months passed after the verdict, but the silence that followed felt heavier than the years of shouting ever did. Ryan was serving his sentence for fraud, and my parents. They'd vanished from my life almost completely. The house was gone, the business was gone, and with it, every illusion I'd ever held about what family meant. One evening, I got a call from Mom. Her voice was small, fragile, a tone I'd never heard from her before. "We're staying in a rented place now," she said quietly. "Your father's health isn't great. We wanted to say we're sorry." I didn't speak at first. I could hear her trying to hold back tears. "We thought we were helping Ryan succeed," she continued, her voice cracking. "We didn't see what it was doing to you, to all of us." When I finally answered, my words came out calm but distant. "You didn't just hurt me. You broke the very thing I was trying to save." There was a long pause. I could hear Dad in the background coughing weakly, then saying, "He was right, Mary. He always was." For the first time, I didn't feel angry, just tired. I visited them a week later. Their small apartment was bare, the walls stained, the air heavy with regret. Mom tried to hug me, but I stood still. "I don't hate you," I said softly. "But I can't go back to pretending this is a family. Not anymore." Her eyes filled with tears, and Dad just nodded, silently accepting the truth they'd spent decades avoiding. I left without looking back, the door closing behind me like the final chapter of a book I'd been forced to live too long. Outside, the wind was cold, but it felt like clarity. It's been over a year since that final visit. My parents still send the occasional holiday card, short, polite, never too emotional. I don't respond. There's nothing left to say that hasn't already been buried under years of silence and choices they can't undo. I live alone now, in a small house just outside the city. It's quiet, filled with sunlight and space that actually feels mine. The first time I turned the key in the lock, I stood there for a long time, just breathing. No echoes of arguments, no guilt hanging in the air, just peace. Some nights, I sit on the porch and think about everything that happened, the sacrifices, betrayal, the courtroom, the emptiness that came after. I used to think justice would make me feel triumphant, but it didn't. It just made me honest. For once, I saw my life without the filter of obligation. I finally started therapy, and my counselor said something that stuck with me. "You confuse love with responsibility?" She was right. I spent most of my life mistaking self-sacrifice for affection. I believed if I gave enough, they'd finally see my worth. But real love doesn't demand proof. It doesn't drain you dry to feed someone else's ego now. I wake up early, make coffee, and work on rebuilding the dream I once buried. I started a small repair business. Nothing fancy, but it's mine. Every paycheck, every satisfied client feels like reclaiming a piece of the dignity I lost. Sometimes people ask if I've forgiven my parents. The truth is, forgiveness isn't a single act. It's a boundary. I don't hate them anymore, but I also don't owe them my peace. Last week, I stood outside my home at sunset, watching the light fade across the roof I paid for myself. I smiled and whispered, almost to the wind, "This one's mine. No one can take it away again."